So good afternoon or good evening. This is Julie Duckle from the California Comprehensive Center that is a member of the Secondary Literacy Partnership, and we're so excited you could take time out of your busy schedule, including our presenters, to be in the conversation today around grappling with text, helping secondary teachers support deeper reading. This event is sponsored by the Secondary Literacy Partnership, and it's great pleasure that I hand over to Letty Krause from the California Department of Education, who'll give an introduction and explain a little bit about the Secondary Literacy Partnership. Over to you, Letty.
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. As Julie said, I'm Letty Krause, and I'm a consultant in the Professional Learning Support Division here at the California Department of Education. We are one of several partners in the Secondary Literacy Partnership, also known as SLP, now entering 16 years of supporting California secondary educators in increasing literacy among their students. Current members of this partnership also include the Association of California School Administrators, the California Comprehensive Center at West Ed, the California Teachers Association, and we are now also pleased to be working with a representative from California's Curriculum and Instruction Steering Committee. So there are several partners, and together we identify literacy-related topics of interest to secondary teachers and education leaders in the field. We then make connections and locate experts who can share their practice with us, and that's how we come to have today's presentation. Our theme this year is Literacy for College and Career Readiness in the 21st Century, and we derive this theme from our California Blueprint for Great Schools version 2.0, which identifies several strategic priority areas, and this year we're working with California standards as a priority because they're designed to prepare students with the knowledge and skills that they need to succeed in college, career, and life, and the SLP recognizes that literacy is key to this preparedness. So I am going to say no more about that, welcome you all here after a long day of work, and let's get started with our presentation.
Thank you, Letty. And just to review, those of you who are new or just arrived, again, quick housekeeping. We'll be using the chat on the far right-hand side to get your reflections and comments, so please type in. We really encourage you to reflect on what's being shared. We'll have some quick polls we just did. We'll have a multiple choice to choose from, and we'll have some video watching, and we'll just explain how that will work when we get further there. If you're hearing my voice and need technical assistance and can't get into the webinar, please email eventhelp@wested.org. Really encourage you to share and get to know one another, so thank you for those of you who typed in introduction and where you were joining us from into the chat. If you haven't already done so, we welcome you to do that. Again, we already selected and did what's your role, so if you weren't part of that poll or none of these descriptions suited where you're entering, please feel free to type that in too. Really like to know who's on this call, and from what we saw, there was folks who range from providing training at the district to social studies to supporting at the county office of ed and specialist teachers working in special ed and English language learners. So thank you for being with us. It's my great pleasure to hand over to my colleague, Mary Stump, who is the Associate Director of Strategic Literacy Initiative here at West Ed. And Mary has had lots of different experiences. She currently serves as Project Director on the Strategic Literacy Initiative, as well as several other federally funding reading apprenticeship initiatives. So I'll let her tell you more about that. And before this, joining West Ed, Mary did manage an education nonprofit and taught composition at San Francisco State University and conducted research. So I'll let, without any further ado, Mary, it's over to you to introduce you a little bit more about yourself and the group of wonderful educators who are with you today.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you, Letty, and the Secondary Literacy Partnership for giving us all this opportunity to come together today. You know, the webinar format can be a tough one, but what it does let us do is get all these people together around a topic, and this one that we're all really interested in. It's great. Thank you all for mentioning some of the things you're interested in and your roles in the chat area. As Julie mentioned, my background is as a composition instructor. That's how I first got into this work and got intrigued with the role of reading and writing within the disciplines. I've also worked as an education research and a project manager in organizations that seek to support teacher and student learning. I've been working with SLI, that's what we call our little group at WestEd, for many years. We are a group of educators and researchers who develop, study, and deliver professional learning focused on disciplinary literacy. We work with hundreds of amazing teachers every year from all over the country, and we're really fortunate to have several of them with us today. The first of whom I'm going to introduce to you now. She's my co-presenter, Melissa Devlin. I was excited she could join us because she's held so many roles relevant to our topic today. She can give us multiple perspectives on what students are struggling with, what teachers are struggling with, and what administrators and districts work with as we all try to improve the learning outcomes for our students, especially with that focus on reading comprehension. So Melissa, why don't you come on and tell us a little bit about yourself and our other panelists.
Absolutely. Hi, Mary. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone who's here today. What a wonderful group, all dedicated to this very important topic in our professional lives. I began as an English teacher in 1997 and found that throughout most of my teaching time in the classroom, I was working with quite a lot of struggling readers. I found myself going back to school to obtain my reading specialist certificate so that I could hopefully better help the students that I was working with. And I still always struggled with my high school learners because secondary students were just a different challenge sometimes in the classroom. And so I came into this work with WestEd in 2010 and really found what became a framework that really helped support my students in the ways that I was looking to support my students and help them with that college and career readiness that is really the topic for our conversation tonight. And from there, I moved into a role not only having learned through the professional development, but then kind of moving into the other side of things and moving into a role of a facilitator of that professional development, and now find myself in the role of statewide coordinator for Pennsylvania, helping to support the work that WestEd is doing within our state, and more importantly, supporting all of the teachers and administrators who are working within their districts to help our students across Pennsylvania. At this point, I have moved out of a classroom role and am a director of curriculum, instruction, and literacy for a very small school district in Pennsylvania called Antietam. And we have a small district of about 1,000 students and 100 teachers, one of whom I'd like to introduce first. That's Tim Matlack. He's one of our middle senior high school English teachers here in our school district. So Tim, if you could just take a moment to say hello and tell us a little bit about what you teach during your day.
Hi, everybody. I teach 11th grade British literature and a wide range of ability levels. I enjoy my time at Antietam, but primarily I teach 11th grade British lit.
Thank you, Tim. And we'll hear lots more from Tim a little farther into our time together this evening. Sorry, it's evening for me. I'm in Pennsylvania. For you, it's still afternoon. And I then would like to also introduce Alicia Ross, who's a social studies teacher in northern Pennsylvania in the Blue Ridge High School. So Alicia, if you could tell us a little bit about your role in the classroom.
Sure. I teach mostly 11th and 12th graders. I teach AP, U.S. Government and Politics, and AP Macroeconomics. But I also teach a general social studies class, which is economics for half the year, and global studies the other half for high school.
Lisa, we're having some trouble with your phone, so we'll just keep on moving there. Maybe you can call back in the general call. Thank you.
Okay. Darn. How's this?
There, I can hear you, Alicia.
Yeah,
okay.
That's better, Alicia. I think it just drops them down. But just a time check, we're at 10 minutes past, so thank you for being here.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to get the ball from you, Julie, here. So I share the slides now, or are you going to keep forwarding for us? Are you there? I'm not hearing anybody.
So Mary, you have the ball. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry, folks. Thanks for your patience as we get our technology straightened out here. Here's our agenda for the day. Oh, and once you come back in, Melissa, you don't have to do it right this second, but I'd say tell folks a little bit about where Antietam is, and same thing for Blue Ridge. For the California folks who are on today, they might not know. So we've done our introductions. We're going to be talking a little bit at first. I'll give you some grounding in disciplinary literacy, because that's very much the frame from which we're approaching this task of really helping our students get better at reading comprehension and working with text. You're then going to hear a little bit about a certain approach we're grounded in called reading apprenticeship, and some specific ways teachers are using literacy practices in their classrooms to support deeper reading. You're going to see where Melissa's going to guide you through a really cool video inquiry. This is a tool we use in our professional learning on a regular basis to get teachers thinking, to really take apart what are students doing, what moves is a teacher making. And then you'll hear more examples from Alicia and Tim and see some work going on in their specific classrooms and kind of what do they find challenging and what do they see happening for their students when they take up this work. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit for those administrators and staff developers and folks in teacher ed in the audience about how to support teachers to do this work. So without further ado, I'll launch into this little bit of background. Again, this is going to be really abbreviated, but just to kind of activate our schema, as we say in our professional learning experiences, about what disciplinary literacy is and how it relates to this task of getting students to read deeper in a discipline. We all know that there's been research that's pointed out that there's a gap, right, between what are the skills and our students are graduating with and the expectations of colleges and career. Part of the effort to close that gap has been a wave of new standards being developed across the country. They vary by our local context, right? But in general, they're calling for literacy to be a shared enterprise across all academic subjects. And this is right where I kind of came into the conversation all those years ago, studying what is the role of writing in higher education and in high school. What's that general ELA class and that general composition course? How are we preparing our students to do that discipline-specific work when there's this wave of research coming out really verifying that how we read, write, and think within any given content area and any given context is highly dependent on kind of the traditions of that discipline. So here on your screen is just a little example that has been widely used around California, kind of showing the math, science, and ELA standards, and they're in the core of them sharing this need for students to be able to do analysis, to construct varied and valid arguments, and to engage in argument from evidence. That's very common, even though our states are calling our standards by different names, and they've been somewhat politicized. That at the core is really, I think, a good thing we who are interested in deepening literacy in the disciplines are excited about. So what is it that students who are college and career ready do, right? What is it that is also somewhat discipline specific, demonstrating independence, right, as learners? College and career kids who succeed in college know how to, you know, take on a long, tough text or even a really short, tough text and stay with it. They know that they can build knowledge by reading and writing multiple sources. That whole let's just turn to one book or one website is not the way we work in our careers, and it's not the way we further our fields, right? Multiple sources and arguing within traditions. We want them to value, cite, and use evidence, and to comprehend as well as critique. So these are just a few examples of our of text, and just to highlight what I was saying about our specialized ways of reading within academic disciplines, right? A historian may be looking at a variety of text types and sources to come to argue why an event happened and what events that occurrence then made happen. A group of students in a lab or a scientist in a lab may make notes in very specific ways from which they're going to later draw conclusions, and they need to document their process in a specific way. A mathematician obviously is going to use a proof. So these are just all to highlight that point that we're doing and using text in different ways. So in order to do that, what do the students need to be doing if they're going to engage in our disciplines, right? If they are going to be independent learners and knowledgeable about reading and writing in different contexts, they need to be doing the hard work of grappling with text, right? They need to have well thought out assignments that require them to solve problems and to use evidence. So as I was getting ready for this, I was talking with Cynthia Greenleaf, and she is one of the co-founders of the Strategic Literacy Initiative, and is just a wonderful scholar. If you're interested in this and you really want to see research that's done collaboratively, always with educators side by side, making sense of how they're using text and what challenges are coming up for students. She's a great one to Google, and she's working on this piece right now. You'll see on the screen, Missing in Action, Learning from Text and Subject Area Classrooms. That's going to be in the next handbook for adolescent literacy that'll be coming out soon. And she said what's striking to her as she and Dr. Valencia were doing preparing this work, that they are seeing that we're using more and varied text in classrooms and tougher text. But what we're still not seeing, yeah.
Just a time check on this section.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up.
Right, thanks.
Is that students are not doing that work. The teachers are doing the work and then presenting it, right? It's something we all struggle with as we have that challenge of having to cover a lot of content and move students really far along. It's really tempting to go faster and kind of do the summary and tell students, this is what this says and this is how you use it, rather than slowing down. So you're going to hear us making the case for slowing down in order to speed up. Look really closely, get sophisticated at your questioning and prompting, and that will enable your students in the end to do this work a lot quicker. So now we're going to move into part 2 here with how we support students to do this work, right? And we want to start off with you all typing one more time into that text box. Share some challenges that you face working with students that when they're grappling with a tough science, history, or literary text. What do you struggle with as a teacher, and or what do you see your students most struggling with? And we'll stop there for just a couple minutes, and then Melissa's going to come on and tell you a little bit about the specific approach from which we analyze how we're making those moves in our classrooms and strategies with which we can hopefully address some of the challenges you're going to be raising. So Melissa, I'm going to be passing this ball to you, or do you need it, Julie?
I'll pass it to Melissa, but as you do that, Mary, lots of folks are popping in some really good challenges they're popping their challenges into the chat, so thank you, everyone. Motivation, folks write academic vocab, difficulty discerning simplifying scaffolding for access, students have different reading levels, many struggling students with content-specific vocab, text, and following directions. Lots of different folks sharing things in the chat. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that's great, seeing those. I think these are shared amongst a lot of us. Student may not understand the main ideas, the content, the vocabulary, how do they extract information. There's a reluctancy to, here's somebody who's using one of the strategies that we'll be mentioning today, talking to the text, making notes and saying what is that, what connections are they making, that sort of stuff. These are all really good, thanks. So I'm going to hand it over to you now, Melissa.
Well, and as I'm reading all the things popping up in that quick write, I sure am thinking that it's at least reassuring knowing that it's the same here across the country in Pennsylvania, and that we certainly are seeing so many of those same concerns as we bring more challenging texts to students, that the struggles are very universal with where students are not yet prepared in many ways for the demands of the texts that we're trying to make accessible to them. And so what we want to really start looking at today are some of the ways in which we help to shift our thinking a little bit from what we see on the screen here in terms of that balance and thinking about where we put the bar sometimes. And I know that I came from a classroom, and Mary, you asked me to mention where Antietam was. We live about 50 miles northwest of Philadelphia, and so we're very much in that southeastern part of Pennsylvania, closer to the coast. And as I entered the profession, I know that I very much was handed a pile of novels and expected to try and help students understand those novels. And we used a lot of teacher read-alouds, and we answered a lot of comprehension questions. And at the end of the day, I really struggled sometimes because I recognized that I was very good at being an independent teacher, but I wasn't necessarily always helping my students become independent thinkers and readers and writers in the ways that we know that we ultimately need them to be in terms of college and career readiness. And so as we think about some of the challenges, it's shifting where we put our bar sometimes so that we make that shift into what we see in the upper right-hand side, where students are asking the questions and gaining ownership over their understanding of a text, that they're interpreting it and sometimes finding multiple interpretations of those texts. And it really shifts the role of the teacher from leader of all content to facilitator of that collaborative inquiry, and the idea that when students begin asking the questions, students are making more meaning out of the text. Students truly begin to grapple with what makes a text hard. And as we move further into looking at some of the work that we've done, a lot of that shift in ownership is what really helps students begin to process what it is about text that makes it challenging. And as we look at the next slide, we really start thinking about the transformative nature when students do become independent, that they gain confidence in themselves as readers and begin to think about text from truly that analytical stance, which as an English teacher helped me bridge that gap into the writing that we wanted them to do, because we truly started connecting how we are able to look at what a writer does to make sense of how we can then better be writers ourselves. So then it also then brings in that close reading to make meaning of complex texts, and thinking about how over time when students are the ones who are summarizing and asking questions and synthesizing instead of us doing that for them sometimes, that really brings that engagement to what they're doing with text, which of course is what we always want our students to be doing. And so as we look at this example of a framework that helps us support all of these things in a classroom, this is the work that we've done through Reading Apprenticeship, but that's just one framework, and there's many different ways to look at these same concepts and notions. This is just one mode of that. And so as we think about the components that I suddenly was thinking about differently in my classroom as I started utilizing this, it was building these different dimensions within my classroom. And the first one really takes us to the social dimension and thinking about how when we help students learn the tools to be collaborative, that they're able to, it creates safety, because when we can pair, share, and partner up with one person and have that conversation, it helps us better share with a whole group or feel more confident in sharing with a whole group. We talk about text a lot, and students learn routines where they know that when they've read something, the first thing they're going to have an opportunity to do after they've read is talk about it. And I know as an adult, we tend to be readers the same way. I know we've all read that really exciting novel, and all we want to do is talk to someone about it. And so often we skip that step with our kids, and we forget that they need those opportunities as well to have those conversations. And so often they're not confident in a whole group to have that bigger discussion. So we resort to teacher asking the questions. Sometimes we get crickets. Sometimes we generate some discussion. But when it's very teacher-led, we know that kids aren't ultimately the ones who might be doing the thinking that we want them to be doing. And so it's building up those opportunities for them to share in smaller opportunities, and then we bring a more rich conversation to the larger group. We think about this personal dimension on the right-hand side as really understanding who our students are as readers. And I think the piece of this that was most transformative for me in my classroom was changing my focus from having so much value on who was able to answer with the right answer to really bringing it back to where are we struggling with this text? What are the challenges that we're facing? And I know as someone had mentioned in their quick write, that idea of having students go deeply and talking to the text. Well, with the students I was working with, we needed to start on the surface of that. Where is the text hard? And that allowed me to see the best ways to differentiate for all of my students in the classroom to then be able to support where they came to the text. We then think about the cognitive dimension in terms of those strategies that we know kids have been learning from early elementary school in terms of understanding text, so that ultimately we can get to that knowledge building dimension, which is our content. And as secondary people, that's our love. We love our social studies, we love our science, we love our ELA, but we want to bring kids to that place so it's really leveraging our own expertise to help students be better readers. We ground all of that in a metacognitive conversation that allows us to really understand what kids are thinking as they're reading. And the more we can understand that, the better we're able to support them as readers. And so that kind of comes back to that first quick write and thinking about what are some of the solutions that we're finding in our teaching practices that allow us to address some of those challenges. And so let's just give everyone a moment to be able to type another quick comment in that chat box to think about what are some of the things that are working for us. We know where students are struggling, but what are we finding that helps them and supports them as students struggling with those tough texts?
Thank you, everyone. Are you seeing things coming up the script? We have academic language scripts being involved in conversation 100%, not just the listener. Think, pair, share. Thank you, everyone. Wow. Giving students manageable chunks of text to begin building a sense of success. Thank you, everyone.
That's great.
Really appreciate your contribution. So, Melissa, back over to you.
Absolutely. So what we'd like to do is take you into a little video inquiry as a group today, and we're going to take a look at a specific classroom of a teacher named Rita Jensen, who in this video is teaching a class of 7th and 8th grade English language development students, and I don't want to tell you too much because that's why we want to be able to ask lots of questions as we're watching this video. So as we dive into this, we'd like to really kind of help give a focus lens to everyone's viewing of this short video. The video clip is only about 5 minutes or so, and as we're doing that, we'd like you, if your last name starts with A through L, to really pay attention in the video to what we see the students doing. How are they interacting? How are they interacting with the text? What do we see that they're doing? And for our last name groups that start with M through Z, to really focus your attention more on the moves the teacher's making. What are her instructional practices that are helping to support her students in building to a place of independence as they're reading? And just to give a little context, the students are working with a piece of poetry called Old Man, and the students will, well, you'll see. I don't want to give anything away, no spoilers. So with that viewing role kind of just planted in the back of your mind, we're going to take you to the next slide, and for logistics purposes, I am going to turn you over to Delphine for a second so that we can just help everyone through the logistics of the video inquiry.
So folks, so what we're going to do now, this is Julie. You'll see a video on the left-hand side which will pop up in your screen. We understand that we'll ask the presenters in a moment not to hit that or play that because we'd like to have them mute their phones, please, presenters, so we don't get feedback. Their plan B, you can also, the link is also posted in the chat. So if it's easier for you to click on the chat and go to the YouTube and play it there. And as we said, we'll put some of the instructions in the chat. Let us know when you're finished by hitting the green check or typing in finished into the chat. And for plan B, if you have any problems accessing the video, we have a plan B. We'll send you a document, and we'll call it plan B, and we'll ask you to read the transcript of the interaction instead. And this will be a 5.5-minute watching, so please let us know. We've got the timer on. We expect everybody back in the room about 6 minutes from now. So thank you, everyone. In the chat, you can hit on the link to the video or the click in the screen. Plan B is to click on the reading activity. Thank you. We're muting our phones now so you can stop playing.
You there, Melissa?
I am here. Sorry, thank you. And I want to just take us to the next slide if we can. So Julie, if you don't, thank you so much.
Yep.
So if you were in our first group of folks who were really paying attention to, oh, and we have them flip-flops here. So our M through Z group, I believe, was looking at our teacher and really thinking about what we saw that teacher doing to support students reading, writing, and thinking about text. If you all could just take a quick moment to share in the chat, what were some of the things that you specifically noticed? And as you're responding, if you can try and kind of scroll your eyes through what other people are saying as well, thank you for some of you who jumped right in and started responding. That's fantastic. What did we see happening that supported that reading, writing, and thinking about the text? What were some of those moves that she made? And I love how right out of the gate we see Susan talking about it being a repetitive strategy, that she's building routines around some of these things. So let's hear from some folks who were really paying that attention to the teacher. So reminding students of the strategies that they might be using. I like how we use the term facilitating that development of ideas, but not necessarily telling the kids what they could see. Great, great observations, everybody.
Yeah, giving them a purpose. I see she keeps the pace going and she gets all the students involved. Yeah, these are all wonderful things that no matter what the level of text it is you're working at, you can do these same things with that foregrounding she's doing, that chunking she's doing, that calling on folks.
Yeah, but I love that observation that the multiple reads with very different purposes. First, we just do that flyby, that scan. The second time we read it, we're paying attention to where we get stuck and what our roadblocks are and how we move past that. And even that piece where, you know, it's difficult, but we're going to press on and keep going through it. Wonderful, great observations. And as we're reading some of these comments, if our student watchers, our observers of the students in the video, would go ahead and start populating some of your responses. What are the things you noticed in the students, especially when we see them starting to take charge of some of those processes that they're going through? Good, great observations all around. Yes, I agree, Susan. That comfort that the students had with each other, that clearly there was a classroom environment set up where students felt very comfortable to share what it was that was happening within that classroom. Absolutely. The evidence from the text that very academic conversation, I agree with someone else, or I disagree with, yes, exactly, that they're able to piggyback on each other's ideas. And I think we very often underestimate our middle-level learners' ability to have those academically focused conversations, especially in a whole group like that. But clearly they have developed those routines and are very comfortable with that. And especially as students who are struggling learners due to their language constraints, it's so great to see that they're so comfortable in that environment. Wonderful. Teacher presenting that reading of the poem, positive environment. And what jumps out, eliciting student responses. Great connections that we're seeing there, everyone. I really appreciate your focusing in on that specific lens as you were watching the video. And as we kind of continue to read what's popping up in the chat, and thank you all so much for your observations, we see some of the routines that on our slide that we saw happening in that classroom as well. We may not have seen the teacher modeling as much in this section of that, and the video goes on farther than what you were able to glean just in this first 5-minute segment. But seeing that partner think aloud and knowing that when we are reading and then having those immediate conversations with our partner, that helps us make sense of what we're confused by. That collaborative meaning making becomes very prevalent throughout this classroom. And then that gradual release of responsibility where the teacher's really turning it over to students to always ultimately build to independence. And that's where I think so often as we as educators want to make sure that our students are successful, but are we always making sure that they're able to be successful with independence? And that's an important component of the work that we do in education, is helping students ultimately be able to do all of these things on their own in the long run. So at this point, we'd like to just pause and see if there are any burning questions that anyone would like to ask. Thank you so much for your participation in our video inquiry. It's always fun to see other people's classrooms and see how they're doing things and see what we can glean from that and what we are able to think about in terms of our own practice and reflect on what we do as teachers. So thank you for that. So if there are any questions, feel free to share that in the chat window.
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks, Mary. Mary just posted where you can get some, where the videos of teachers are available on the readingapprenticeship.org website, so you can use those in your own practice pieces. Any questions, please jump in, and we'll have 1 or 2 minutes to address them.
It's always hard to know if folks are typing or if there just aren't any questions.
You know what? I think this way common webinars, I find I just have to count it out, so it's so easy to jump in. You can see folks' faces. So we'll give it another minute. I know folks are digesting up it. Any questions, comments on what's just being shared?
And you're going to hear more about them and more practices from our 2 teachers now too. So if you're still thinking, you can type those in as we go through the next section too.
Fantastic. So that's a great idea, Mary. We'll just keep moving forward, and folks, please jump in like you've been doing. We can take them up and round them up, and thank you, Warren, for clicking in and giving us some more information. So back to you, Mary, and Melissa for our great voices from the field, please.
All right, thank you, Julie. And at this point, we really want to make sure that we have an opportunity for our teachers who are in classrooms doing so much of this hard work to share some of the things that have really been successful for them. And with that, I'm going to just jump right in and take us to an opportunity to hear from Alicia, who began utilizing Reading Apprenticeship in her classroom, if I remember correctly, in about 2011 as well, Alicia. And she's going to have an opportunity to tell us a little bit about her school and her classroom, and then in addition to that, really take us through a little bit of her journey in terms of what has changed from when she started in her classroom and really became more explicit about literacy goals in the social studies content and how those strategies worked with her students.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Okay, good. Yes. Okay. All right, so I don't, she's Blue Ridge High in the northern, so if you've ever watched The Office, I'm, a half hour from Scranton. That might be something that California can connect to. So, yeah, I teach a couple of AP courses, AP U.S. Government and Politics, AP Macro, but I also, because we're in school, I teach all the seniors. So I have general ed classes and teach as well on sociology. I think the big shift for me, I certainly did some reading activities, but, you know, text was never at the center of what I did, or that I was the center of my classroom. This, I think, really resonates with a lot of a lot of social studies teachers, we love our subject and we really love to talk about our subject. I went in hook, line, and sinker. I couldn't believe how much, I think, more fun I was having. My students at the center, and this is from my classroom, and really started thinking, you know, I love social studies because one of the reasons I love it is way. I really need, I love the idea of having as the subject matter specialist. I think, I don't know if you want to advance the slide there, Melissa. Here is a couple of scenes from my classroom, and I mean, I'm going to maybe just throw out a few things. I know there are certainly time constraints, but I really have reading apprenticeship like religion, so I can get carried away. Anyways, one of the things we do at the beginning of the year is setting of norms, and so the students generated these. It's their classroom, or it's our classroom, and so these are the things that they want in a learning environment. I have them do a quick write first. Think about a learning experience you had that was especially effective for you. What were the things that were present that helped you learn? So that, so many different classes. I also posted up on our Edmodo page. Another, here's the stoplight, and I know it's upside down, but it's up there and it's staying on the wall. My walls aren't always so friendly, but this is a part of the metacognitive practice in our room. Is this idea is, you know, when you have questions, I want them surfaced, and it's not that you generate questions and then I answer them. There's an inquiry model that's part of a reading apprenticeship. And the kids who posted, they put their names on a Post-it note, and stuck it in green means they feel really confident about the day's lesson. And then for the students that are in yellow, they're not quite so sure, but they have to give me a specific question or confusion. And then if you put red, you're really feeling lost. So that's something I do in terms of formative assessment, but also having the kids generate their own confusion, or their own confusions, sharing them with others, and then for the students that feel confident, they can share their own thinking. If they know, if they understand something, how they understand it, and often it's going right back to them. One of the things about talking to the text, and I'll just say briefly that I start the year off. Some kids I loop with because I had them last year, the AP kids, and then they go into economics with me. And so this is for the first week of school. This is happening just because they've been my apprentices. Classroom in the building, certainly using it. I think we've had great success. I have new textbooks, so we have to be nice to the textbooks. And so at every table, I make sure that as they read, they are obviously recording their thoughts, questions, confusions, their musings on the Post-it notes, and then I can see their thinking. They're better equipped to share their thinking with their classmates. So a routine is often in an AP classroom because we have to assign homework. There's just the volume of work to get through. While I'm taking a roll, you're talking, you're discussing the prior night's reading. There may be a certain protocol we use, but it's a pretty well-established routine that when you come in, you're sharing, and everyone, part of the social dimension is that everyone feels comfortable sharing at their tables. Kids arranged in tables of 4, maybe 3 or 4 kids. So that's a way that we can talk to the text. And there's just an additional example. You can see this is pretty typical. I just got my phone out and took this picture. You can see the kids have their text out. There was another text that you can see. There's a chart over there. So it's a little bit of a tech set happening there. Again, kids sharing their thoughts. This is just part of the culture in our room.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Alicia. Tell us a little bit about what students are doing.
Can I tell you about this activity quickly?
Yeah.
Or I don't. Oh. Okay, so this is my AP Gov kids, and I've done this with all my kids. They were to read the night before. We had finished chapter 2, but I wanted them to go back to the introduction to the chapter, which always opens with sort of an example of the concepts covered. And it was 18-year-old suffrage, how that happened, and it sort of brings in all the different concepts, separation of powers, checks and balances, ultimately judicial review, and then an amendment. So I asked them as they reread the intro to then make connections to the things that we studied. And the paper, each year-old suffrage not to talk during this, and they were to record their thoughts, and then, and I think you may have another picture of this, if you can, I might be able, is there another picture? Yes, so here it is. Here's one group, and this may be, this might have taken them about 10 minutes to do, 10, 15 minutes. So it doesn't take long, but they make those connections. And for the groups, when it looked like they were adding stuff, but they weren't making arrows, the stuff in blue, I wrote in, and then I started drawing arrows. I didn't say a word to them, but I just went around to each group and did that. And then so I did some modeling there. So this is what they did without talking to each other. They generated those connections, and then when we were done, they had a discussion. Then they could talk. But it was really important for everyone to feel like they were participating. So everybody had a different color marker. And it's just great at the reading. So this is a nice strategy. I mean, I have a routine set, but then I like to vary the strategies, but always putting them at the center and the text at the center and their thinking, their metacognition at the center.
Wonderful, and I love that opportunity. I love the different colored markers so that everyone's voice is visible on the paper, that connection between some reading and some writing, and that you silently sneak in and add your connections and start drawing arrows to model, yet without explicitly telling them what you're doing so that they can figure out what you're doing. That's wonderful to hear about. Thank you so much.
Well, I would ask them, how did that feel? Because this happened, within the first 2 weeks of school. How did that feel? What was that you're learning?
So unfortunately, your audio is coming out a little bit, Alicia, but what I think to hear you talking about is the kids are then reflecting on that process. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. How am I now? Can you hear me?
That's better. Yeah. So talk about that metacognition piece. What does that tell you at the end of the day about how students related to that content?
Well, what it tells me is sometimes I will see a flaw in there. It's not always that they're making the connections. It's sometimes you can see things are breaking down. And I think that for those students, then they're able to help someone else as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alicia.
No problem.
And I'd like to turn to Tim for a moment. And I'm sorry. Karen, was it you?
a question. Alicia, if you want to jump back into the chat, people can ask you questions in the chat too. So if they're having problems hearing your sound, you can always ask for clarification in the chat. So I'd like you to continue the conversation there. Sorry, Melissa, we're back to you and Tim.
Julie, I appreciate that addition. So I want to now turn to Tim. Tim, would you tell us a little bit about where and how you began some of these practices in your classroom?
Sure thing. So in terms of being explicit, after going through the RA training, I kind of arrived at a point that I was saying there really shouldn't be anything mysterious about learning about what's going on in the classroom. So it was really, for me, a moment of making sure that I'm maintaining a tight focus on having a really good essential question and, by extension, a concrete, tangible purpose for the work that we're doing in any given day. So on these example slides, the essential question that I used for that day is actually lifted from the RA text out of Chapter 3. And as I was reading the text, I arrived at this point and kind of stopped, highlighted it, and had a metacognitive moment of myself and saying, well, that's a really good question. It was an example of a student, I believe it was a community college student, asking an instructor the question, why should I read if I can get the information some other way? And that just made me pause and reflect. And if the work I was doing was purely based on getting information, then I'm not really sure how I could really adequately answer that question, because they have a point. If what I'm doing is purely about just getting information, then why would you have to read if you could get it some other way? So I wanted, at the very beginning of the year, for the students in my room to be able to grapple with that idea. So in the samples that you see there on the slides, for that day, the students were given one of 3 sections, which I also took from the Reading Apprenticeship textbook. One was a section on the literacy ceiling, one on literacy in the workplace, and one on literacy at the college level. And each student was paired with another, and they did a think aloud while they were reading a section that they both shared. And at that moment, it was, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd day of school. So we really, aside from setting norms, kind of like Alicia had alluded to, we hadn't really done a great amount of digging into the nitty-gritty of specific strategies, et cetera, in reading apprenticeship. But as I was listening in to students as they talked, 2 of the students I had actually as 9th graders, and as they were reading and thinking aloud, one of them hit the word mystified and kind of stopped and was saying mystified. Maybe that's kind of like mysterious, and looked over at me for confirmation. And at that moment, my knee-jerk reaction as the teacher is to jump right in, but I had to clamp down and just let them go, nodded, let them consider it. And as they continued reading, they came across the word disconcerted. And they had about a 2-minute conversation back and forth trying to pull apart what the word disconcerted meant, looking at the prefix, looking at the root. And all I did was stand back and smile, and after a couple of minutes, they kind of looked at me and were actually asking, why are you just standing there smiling? And I said, well, I think I can just leave the room. You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. I don't even need to be here. You're asking the questions you need to ask. You're recognizing what you need to recognize, and you're fixing up the fact that you don't know the word, and you've got the appropriate strategies to do so. So my work here is done. I'm just going to go home today. So, and just in that moment, in language arts, it's obviously a little bit different than social studies or science content area. That moment was a moment of, they've already identified vocabulary words. They don't need those words in boldface on that paper to say, hey, this is an important word, and here's the definition. They realized that they didn't know what the word meant, and they realized that they needed to know what the word meant to keep going. So just that moment tells me that in science and social studies, they can do the same thing, that they can recognize that I'm going to need to know what this word is and can self-identify where they're going to need to extend their understanding of vocabulary or whatever it may be. So that was a really great moment as they were reading together. Once they had finished reading with partners, the like sections, they were placed into groups of 3 in which they were grouped with 2 other people who had 2 other different sections, so that each group had one of the 3 different sections. And on the piece of paper that you see there, they were each responsible to be the expert in that group on their particular piece that they had read, and to get down on the paper the most significant pieces of information that they gleaned from their reading for the group. And once they had done that, the group had the opportunity to take a step back, kind of survey the landscape of, these are all the things that we've each pulled out on this topic of literacy, just from different lenses. Now we have this moment of, okay, we need to come together and synthesize all of these somewhat disparate ideas into one contained answer of, so why is it that I should read if I can get the information some other way? And that is the statement that is located in that center box of those 2 slides. And they really came to the conclusions the same conclusions that the text is drawing in terms of the importance of literacy, and that it's not just about getting information, and it can't be just about getting information. So they really showed that, number one, they understood what they read, and number two, more importantly, they were able to synthesize everything that they had read into a single thought that captures the most important idea that we were going for that day. So did I need to give them a multiple choice quiz or a short answer question on their reading that day that I was going to grade and hand back to them and pick apart? No. That work that they did individually, collaboratively, that shows me everything that I need to know about did they get it and can they do something with it. And there it is right there, simple as that.
Thank you, Tim, so much for sharing those early days of your school year and how being so explicit with the opportunity to have students thinking about why we do what we do and why we do it the way we do it, hopefully helps with the purpose that they have for all the literacy work they do throughout their school year. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let's go ahead and offer another opportunity. If there are any questions anyone has for our two teachers who are here with us this evening, please don't hesitate to go ahead and type those in the chat.
So this is Mary, and I'm trying to mind your countdown technique. Julie, should we forge ahead now? Actually, our panelists are going to keep talking a little bit more now. We're going to shift our emphasis a little bit on what they're talking about, but you'll have time to keep asking them questions in the chat, folks, if you've got more questions.
So Mary, what slide do you want to be on to continue?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you've got the bowl back,
so
Mary.
There we go. I got it. So we're going to shift now. Oh, go ahead. Julie?
No, I'm just saying great. Thank you.
Okay. So we want to, these folks that you've heard, Tim and Alicia, got to work a lot with other teachers to delve into this. And it's something we all need the opportunity to do, to have that time to practice these things together. For a lot of teachers, they, especially anybody who came through teacher preparation that was highly focused on really sticking to almost a scripted curriculum and being the deliverer of the content. These types of literacy practices really demand that you step back. So teachers need their own classroom where they've got facilitators modeling this, because if you've never thought aloud while you're reading a challenging text, it's a little weird at first, right? And some teachers freeze up and are like, well, I might look silly, but actually students, when you make your thinking process visible for your students and asking your questions and they see you writing on the text, it really does open up the world of your thinking and give them new ways to access text when they may have just been stuck and moved on before. So we are, all the panelists are involved in professional learning that really puts teachers in these highly interactive experiences, these really highly designed experiences, so that they can practice some of these tools together. So I'm going to stick with the panel here and ask each of you folks a question, again, about how you got to work with other teachers and how that what that experience was like, and then we'll have one more higher level look for the administrators in the room or people in teacher support positions about how the district might find time and resources for teachers to do this. So let's start with you, Alicia, and tell us about some of the ways you've gotten to work with other teachers to look closely at your classroom practice. And our emphasis is on literacy and reading, but if there's other stuff related to your field, that doesn't have to be solely about that or reading apprenticeship, but just rather, you know, what really made a difference for you when you get to work with teachers and talk, really focus in on practice?
Okay, I hope my sound is okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, I think the thing that's so terrific about Reading Apprenticeship is that there are people in your building that have leadership qualities but don't want to leave the classroom. So what I have enjoyed about Reading Apprenticeship is that the way it was developed in our district with obviously West Ed, developed and sustained is really because teachers bought in, and we support each other, and of course we need our administrators to help us carve out that time. So we now are in our, I think, sixth year, and we have PLCs that meet once a month. And also there's, within my department, we share text, we share ideas, strategies that worked, we observe each other. There have been some younger teachers that have come into my room, or I've gone in, you know, in my planning period, sometimes I'll go and see what's going on in somebody else's classroom. They've shared something. I want to see what that's about. And that's another shift, too. It used to be we were all in our own little kingdoms, and it's created more collaboration, I think, with us. Casual conversations in the hallways, you know, it is part of now our school culture. To have those conversations. So I know it's helped me with my practice. I hope I've helped other people too. So that's really, well, I think it just really is a real cultural shift for everyone.
Great, thanks, Alicia. Yeah, those professional learning communities can take, when she said PLC, those can take many shapes and forms, but again, those ones that are dialogic, and just like we were talking about a classroom culture that supports people feeling safe to have a hallway conversation or to open up your classroom door to one another, that is this this larger experience that I'll have Melissa in a moment talk, but I think first too, but is Tim. And Tim was newer to some of these sorts of ways of making your goals and your literacy practices really explicit. So Tim, what made you feel safe to try out new things in your classroom and reflect honestly with colleagues?
Well, honestly, I'm a little bit spoiled, I think, in the fact that Melissa Devlin is in my district, and even better, she's in my building. So as long as she happens to be in the building and not one of our other buildings in the district, I'd say this year so far, at least 3/4 of the days that we've been in school, she's had me in her, well, I've gone to her office at some point to debrief with her. And so I feel like I'm a little bit spoiled in that sense. But when I first started the process, it was in January of last year, and Melissa was very explicit that this takes time, that it's not something that you're going to master in a week or in a month or a year or even beyond a year. And so that immediately, to me, makes room for mistakes and for reflection, metacognitive reflection, and therefore for growth. And it's oddly the same principles that we should be establishing in our RA classrooms. So, and I've had a moment in graduate classes recently to say it's the way that we approach learning as adults is no different than the way we approach learning with kids. So it all comes full circle to me. And it really gave myself and my fellow faculty members who went through this training that comfort to be able to embrace that, hey, none of us has this nailed down. We're all working on it, and we're working on it together. It's a collegial approach. We're all learning. We're all growing. And that is a very important comfort level to have, because oftentimes as teachers, we don't like being uncomfortable. We like being in control. We like feeling like we have a handle on things, and we are masters of our content and everything that goes on in our room. And just having the comfort and the support from Melissa to step back and say, hey, you know what, it's not going to be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes, but they're going to be mistakes that I can reflect on and that I can improve my instruction down the road.
Great. Thanks, Tim.
So, Mary, I was wondering,
go ahead.
If anybody is on the call, I know if, as Alyssa and Tim have reflected on their practices, please let us know if this resonates with you, or if you're using professional learning communities, what you're doing from what we're hearing here. So we invite you into sharing what the panelists are saying in the chat. So, Mary, back to you.
Great. So we're going to continue on here and now hear from Melissa, who kind of has, like what I said, those multiple lenses of having been that teacher trying things out for the first time, and then working as a colleague with other teachers as a teacher leader, and then as a teacher of teachers as a facilitator, and now as an administrator. Melissa, what do you want to share about kind of how districts find the time, right? We all know that professional learning time is all too rare, but how do we actually make that shift and carve out the time and craft the meetings so they're really about classroom inquiry?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mary. I think that's such a really important question, because all teachers experience professional development at such different levels. And so often, I know from my own experience early in my career, it was, here's the professional development, go forth and do. And then there was an expectation of successful accomplishment at the end of that. And I think without those multiple levels of support, I think Tim kind of made the point, adult learners are not that different sometimes from our student learners. And when we really think about supports that are needed, we generally as teachers we try not to just assign something to a student and expect them to accomplish it without the teaching involved, the support involved, the conferencing involved, and whatever else might be necessary to help a student be successful with that. So when we think about what helps teachers be successful, I've had the opportunity to work with districts around the state of Pennsylvania, and there's a number of things that really help support that. Coaching in and of itself as an initiative allows for so many of those conversations to happen with another colleague. And I think Tim said it too, those hallway, and Alicia both said it, those hallway conversations with colleagues are essential to just, you see something someone else is doing and you ask the questions. And it allows for just sharing of practices in a way that feels comfortable, because it's out of curiosity. It's not because anyone's mandating that someone try something. And so, with some of these instructional practices, it really is knowing that administrators are comfortable enough with the trial and error process so that we can support teachers and help them have that safe space to be able to try things out. But then, how do we come back together and reflect on that? And so one of the things that we've worked with through some of the grants that have supported Reading Apprenticeship in Pennsylvania is a process where a teacher leader is sitting down with a group of teachers who are in the same cohort, perhaps, of learning with all of this, and taking that opportunity to share, hey, what's working really well? And hey, where are we struggling a little bit, and how might we overcome that? And having those opportunities to just come together with a clear agenda around what it is that we want to talk about, so that we have a chance to share a really great successful story, and then a really real struggle that someone might be having that we can then all work together to problem solve. And those opportunities can be really critical. And I think the reality of most things in professional learning communities, if we feel that it's successful and valuable, we want to continue it. And when we want to continue it, we want to advocate for it. We want to help our administrators understand we need that time together, and here's how we grow as a result of that. So now that I'm on the administrative side of all of those things, I recognize that I need to help teachers find time, make the time during an early dismissal day or an in-service day to come together for an hour and have conversations around the literacy approaches that are working for our kids. And sometimes that might look like an opportunity to just look at some student work for a grade level and see what kind of trends we have, set some goals around what we want to accomplish. It might be around the successes and challenges of instructional practices. It might be looking back into how do we further help support each other, or what further administrative support do we need to help with this process and to help us grow as professionals. And I think when we have the time to reflect on that, and the conversations between administrators and teachers are happening, then administrators are best able to provide the support that teachers really need.
And they're all good suggestions, and feel free to answer in the chat, folks, kind of if you've had experiences with PLCs that worked, or those kinds of supports Melissa was talking about. We've got one comment, Melissa, about a large district and somebody who's saying that there is often, unless the PD is mandated, it's hit and miss. But there some of the things, there's release time, obviously, for teachers at various amounts of time in districts. One person sharing the challenge, unfortunately, the same faces that will come back to over and over. And we find that, too. I think some of the things I've heard teachers, how they're getting those colleagues who may be less reticent is usually talking about what a success that they are having or something that's going on. The teachers notice, right, what else is going on in other classrooms similar to theirs, and they'll say, what's going on with yours? And that'll bring them into a conversation about classroom practice, and then maybe they'll get a PLC going. I've seen teachers do work together with book studies at the department. I'm looking at anything else there in the chat, Julie, we want to, or should we push ahead? I know we're almost out of time.
I think to wrap up, I think there's a lot of, we've shared a lot of pieces here, and it's a long day, so I think it'd be great just to wrap up and thank folks for sharing their reflections, and we'll continue any questions in the chat.
Great. So this is just summing up some of what each of the panelists were saying. That time obviously is one thing we can make happen. Supportive colleagues, again, we could do a whole nother webinar and spend years talking about how we create those positive school climates, like our classroom climates, that permission that Tim referenced to innovate, to try things out. Some flexibility to slow down, right, in order to speed up. And again, those well-designed experiences that will help teachers delve deeply into their practice. And these are just a few bullet points kind of about that inquiry-based professional learning, giving teachers these sorts of experiences that will help them surface their own expertise as readers and as content experts, so that those are more accessible to their students. So we want to leave you with one last chore. Some of our professional learning ends with promises to practice. So what's one thing, you can either share this or note it down for yourself. You can share it in the chat or note it down. But what's one thing you learned today that you want to know more about? Or if you've got a classroom, you teachers who are still with us on the line, what will you try out in your classroom? What's one thing you want to try out or investigate with your colleagues?
Mary, I'm curious about what's on the board here with those Post-its.
I know, I didn't get to zoom in enough, but often there's things like I could see one that says they really want to try out talking to the text, so like a specific routine. One person wrote social dimension, and big words, and that's kind of that, how do you make the, I'm going to work on getting to know the kids and having the kids know one another so that there are more, they feel safe to share their thinking and share their confusions, because that's where the learning starts, right? It doesn't start when we all say, I know, I know, I know. It's like, well, I was wondering about, or I was stuck on, and then a dialogue starts and they go forward. So it can be, I hear, see one administrator saying, I learned some strategies I can use to help teachers. People are appreciating your red light, green light, and exit tickets there and the waiting technique. One person reflecting, as teachers, it's really hard to let kids struggle, but it's good, right? That is that space when you're so conscious of, okay, I can't shut out the answer. They're not getting it. How do I lead them to it? How do I craft an experience that'll get them going? Here's one person wanting to have students sharing their ideas with talking to the text as a good way to develop pre-reading skills. So those are all really wonderful, wonderful things. I'm going to, I think there's our contact info. If anybody wants to email any of the presenters directly, feel free to do that. And then I think we've got a wrap-up slide here. Oh, and this was also from teachers reflecting at the end of what a professional learning experience. That was, I thought, a nice positive end. You want to take it away, Julie, and wrap us up?
Yeah, definitely. But I would like you to share a little bit about some of the goodies that you put, Mary, in the box for everyone to look at. You have a publication. We'll push out the survey on the left so people can give us their feedback. But can you share a little bit about what's in the box? You have a handout. You have some reading. You put the link.
Yeah. So folks who want to know more, there is something called the Mixed Familial Gatherings that'll tell you more about the classroom video case you saw today, what Rita was doing. There's a really nice piece that gets to this last part of our talk about called Building a Culture of Engaged Academic Literacy. It's pretty short and accessible. There's a flyer for a book that's coming out that really is about supporting teacher leaders and gives you really concrete classroom stories and tools to support teacher leadership, which is often a way we get to those reluctant teachers, right, through a colleague. And the framework is there, which we referenced earlier, so that you can download as well. And copies of the slides today, a PDF of the slides.
Yeah, Mary, so I want to really thank you and Melissa and Lisa and Tim for being our presenters and our participants for engaging and sharing their work. So thank you so much. Folks, we'll push out the video so you can actually, the survey to give us your feedback. We want to let you know that the archive will be ready for this recording from this event to share with your colleagues and bring that practice back. Plus, thank you, Mary, for sharing the great resources you put in there to get folks started. Want to alert you to 2 follow-up webinars that the Secondary Literacy Partnership will be convening, one in October coming up, and on Universal Design for Learning Plans and the Building the Educator Assessment Literacy Project in California here. So thank you, everybody, and Mary and team, thank you so much for being with us today and keeping up that fabulous work on behalf of the students you work with. So any last words, Mary and crew, as we end off today? Letty, I'm going to circle back to you, too.
Yeah, no, Letty, pop in. This is Mary. I just wanted to add my thanks to yours, a special appreciation for our educators here at the end of a long day, jumping in to talk about what's going on in our classrooms. Thank you so much, you guys. And I see somebody asking about, we said we'd share a website with a chemistry video. I think I shared that earlier. Readingapprenticeship.org has a bunch of videos, different subject areas, different student populations with teachers working, and not all of them are just exemplars of perfect practice, but we really use video as an inquiry tool. So they're great videos to pop in, and it's on the home page of www.readingapprenticeship.org. There's a box that says videos, and you can click on that.
Great, thank you. We just popped it back in the chat. That's great.
Thank you, guys.
Letty?
Well, I think everyone's said it all. I'll just mention a couple of theme words or phrases. This idea of making thinking visible, metacognition, that it's a collaborative effort, that you have you're forming a community where teachers and students are sharing the work together in an apprenticeship as reading apprenticeship notes. So I appreciate the work and what you've shared with us today. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. That's a great note to end on, and we wish you well, and we invite everyone back to listen to the archive, share the archive, and come to follow-up webinars, and to continue your professional learning. And thank you for spending time with our wonderful presenters this afternoon and taking time out of your busy day. Thanks all. Give us your surveys in the chat there, and we appreciate your time and participation. Take care. Bye.